Hi, we're here with John Chamberlin at the Greenville Public Library. John is currently exhibiting his quilt work at the library in our exhibition spaces. So we're just going to do a little interview here. So John is a retired full-time faculty member at the Department of Teaching, Learning in Art and Design at Rhode Island School of Design. During the 31 years at RISD, he held numerous leadership positions in art and design. And all different kinds of. You have so many different positions,
Yes.
all
Yes,
around. So
I modeled my blurb for the newsletter down to one page.
yeah,
But my resume, I was, I mean, I just, yeah,
there's a lot on there.
there's a lot on there. But anyway, that's good.
Yeah. So well, I guess let's hear it from you. So can you talk a little bit about yourself and the work that you're currently showing at the library?
Well, currently, again, I'm retired. I've been a maker most of my life. My family are a family of makers. My maternal grandfather had a foundry, and he also was a wood turner. So, when I was growing up, we had salad bowls out of walnut that he had turned on the lathe, and lamps and so forth. And also cast metal pieces. One of my fondest memories is being in his foundry and the smell of the sand casting and watching the molten metal being poured into that. My paternal grandfather was a glass blower. Unfortunately, he died when I was 9, and we moved away from him. He lived in my maternal grandfather lived in the Midwest, in the southwestern Missouri, in Joplin, Missouri. And my paternal grandfather was from Camden, New Jersey, but he was a glass blower in Millville at the Wheaton Glass Works, which is pretty well known in that part of the country. And we moved away when I was 4, so I don't have, and he was retired by that time, so I don't have any memory of that. But again, a family of makers, and when I became an art student in college, it just seemed, and that only happened to me when I was a junior in college. I came late. I had always been an academic and on an academic bent, and to be a teacher, a YMCA director, an Episcopal priest, something like that, but when it sort of finally, I gave in to the urge to become an art student, it just seemed to open up for me. Then after that, I graduated, but by the time I graduated with a BA, I was married, and my wife at the time, Melinda Alexander, was also an art student. We met in a painting class, and all of a sudden I thought, oh my God, I'm a husband, I need to get a job. And so I did pursue getting a teaching degree. And so for the first 10 years of my career, I was an at the elementary level. And then that was supposed to be a temporary ploy. And about the 8th year, I thought, wait a minute, I don't really want to do this the rest of my life. Plus, it was getting not very challenging to me, and I wasn't being able to make anything. So I decided to go back to school thinking I was going to be more of a maker, but I ended up with a master's and PhD work in academics. Fortunately, I landed at Rhode Island School of Design, where everybody's a maker there almost, except even some of the liberal arts history and philosophy professors, so that it was permissive. I had permission, so to speak, to be a maker, not to compete with my studio faculty colleagues who are doing shows, exhibits in New York or Europe or Asia, but still to be able to be a maker. And I had always loved ceramics, and so that's what I was for a couple of decades. When I first was at RISD, I was a ceramic tile maker. I did lots of projects that are throughout New England, In fact, this tile plaque that's here is this is from 2002. At the time, I was part of the Rhode Island Art Education Association. I can't remember what position I had in 2002, but I did the vice president, president, past president. I did a cycle of board member positions there. But at the time, we had decided, actually it was Barbara Wigren, who was, she's retired now, but she was a teacher at Pontigansett High School, had said, we're giving these awards, why don't we give them an art piece instead of just, like a plaque on a piece of wood, metal plaque on a piece of wood. So, since I was a tile maker, they said, John, why don't you make something? So I did, and so for a number of years I did these tile plaques, and with the clay you're able to do some lettering, with rubber stamp letters and so forth. And so this was given to the Greenville Public Library in 2002 in thanks for their supporting Youth Art Month, which occurs every year throughout the United States, and is part of the activity of the Rhode Island Art Education Association. Now I'm babbling on here. Where do I go from here?
Well, I guess if you wanted to talk about the work you're showing at the library now.
Oh, right, okay, all right.
Yeah.
So then I was saying that I did a lot of tile work. I did fireplace surrounds. I was on the board of City Arts, which is an arts nonprofit in South Providence, still going strong, working with underserved youth from 8 to 14. And as a fundraiser, a couple of years in a row, I made a series of tiles, 2 feet by 2 feet tables with little pedestal tables that we auctioned off or sold, and then I did. I think I mentioned fireplace. I also did lots of mirrors. That one of them I exchanged to my. It's hanging in my dentist office, and it's been there for over 20 years. And that was in lieu of some payment of some of my dental bill. But I also donated lots to different charities for like AIDS Project Rhode Island, for silent auctions. I've been influenced by quilt patterns, the geometry, the symmetry, and so forth. And I had all these quilt books. I had a quilt, 2 quilts from my maternal grandmother. I had one from my paternal grandmother, but I gave that one to my sister. And so I always liked the handmade, the functionality plus the aesthetic quality of a quilt. And I thought, I always wanted to do this, and I was getting towards 70 at that time, and I thought, okay, when? So I went online, looked around, and this is about 7 years ago, and I found out that to get into a quilt class, I needed to learn how to sew. So it just so happened that somebody that I knew was a sewer, and he's a painter, but he also sewed, and so he taught me the rudiments of the machine and straight stitching and cutting and so forth, piecing and so forth. And so that allowed me to then join a beginning class at RICO, which is in Lincoln. And my teacher there was Judy Harrison, a great teacher. She's a retired 4th grade teacher and a wonderful, wonderful teacher. And I took several classes from her and also from Sue. Now I'm blanking on Sue's last name. I'm sorry, Sue. Anyway, at RICO. And then after that, I just started evolving and making my own designs and also doing tutorials offline. There are just hundreds of tutorials online once you know basic rudimentary procedure for the construction of a quilt. and it's just, and now that I'm retired, I'm just sort of in hog heaven in that I get to make all day or as much as I want. Of course, I also do the dishes and do laundry and shop and stuff like that, but most of my time is made up of making things. And so and I don't really sell them, although I have traded. Like I traded, one of the trades I did was with the woman that cuts my hair, Alina Gouveia at the Cutting Club. I traded her a quilt, and then I got 11 haircuts out of it. so, so the other trade was one of my cleaning ladies, and I just said, okay, I'll just, I gave, not gave her the quilt, but then I just paid her like $20 less each time they came over a period of time until we went to the agreed upon price. But that's really the only time so I really haven't sold anything. What I do is I donate them to Child Family Services here in Rhode Island, and my contact there is Arlene DeChico. Now, the reason we went to Child Family Services is that I had started, the other thing I had done is I had started a quilt ministry at the parish I go to, Grace Episcopal Church on Westminster Street in downtown Providence. And one of the members, there were three of us, and this is, by the way, we started this just about a year ago. Well, about 15 months ago. So it was we just got started when the pandemic hit. So we're on hiatus from that. But one of the members, John Chamberlin, no relation, although, anyway, no relation. Maybe distant cousin. Her husband may be Oliver may be a distant cousin. But had mentioned this group called My Very Own Blanket, a tip that she'd gotten from a friend. Now, previously I had worked with the Linus Project, which is another national nonprofit with representatives here in Rhode Island. And with that, I had done 2 different projects with the International Charter School and the art teacher there, Allison Plump, working with 3 sections of 5th grade students during RISD's winter session. Now, RISD has a year where there's 3 different periods during the year. There's a fall semester, spring semester, and what is called a winter session, which used to be is like 5-6 weeks of January, February. During that time, each faculty member only has 1 course that they teach. So I was able to have the time to actually go to that school every day at the same time in the morning prior to my classes and work with these on a rotating basis, work with these 5th grade students, and we made quilts that were then donated to the Linus Project. Now I gotten lost here somewhere. Okay.
Well, no, that's really interesting, and I like that. You came such full circle. Through all of your work.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So, well, I guess we could talk a little bit about the process of your quilt making and what that looks like. So how do you make decisions about
Oh, well, a maker has to make, whether you're a jeweler, a stone carver, a painter, printmaker, you have to make. And so the process, once you learn the technical process, it becomes it's kinesthetic and it's also intellectual and it's also emotional, but I just simply do what I like. And with a quilt, you have a color palette, and you have then a quilt is organized in blocks, which are segments that are then pieced together. But then the block is pieced together. I mean, the block could be just one piece of fabric, and you see those with just simply squares of different colored fabrics. It could be like a black and white floor pattern or it could be multicolored. But but there are also hundreds of historic block patterns from the early 19th century. Now, quilting began, by the way, in Egypt and China, like thousands of years ago, for clothing, the quilted fabric. And in the 18th century in America, most quilts were, a lot of quilts, I shouldn't say most, but I know a lot of quilts were one-piece quilts, because the idea was to show off needlework, so that a young woman of quality would have an accomplishment to go to her marriage. Okay. Now this is a certain social class, right? However, when what happened was, when in the 19th century, with the Industrial Revolution, fabric became cheaper. People that were pioneers weren't making their own cloth anymore, and also the sewing machine was invented around the 1850s. And although prior to that, quilts were pieced, but the quilts were made of scraps left over from clothing and different articles for the home. And so it was a part of a repurposing. You know, we have this throwaway, but we're not throwing it away. We're going to use it. And nowadays, of course, we buy fabric. We don't do that. Although what I have done is that a lot of my quilt patterns are based on scraps. We don't have any to show you right here, but so I sew scraps together and then cut those up and then put them together and put them together and put them together. And so I sort of developed, not that I'm probably the only one, not that it's original with me, because I'm sure other people have done it, but it's sort of the direction that I've gone in, is taking historic quilt patterns and then adapting them for me to what I like in the color palette I like, and so forth. So I simply, like my mother was a shoe she had like hundreds of pairs of shoes. I have piles and piles of fabric, and so I'm online constantly buying new fabric because of the colors that go together. And so anyway, the process of quilt is, okay, what size, who's it going to be for? Now what I'm doing is I'm making quilts right now for infants to like 18-year-olds. I don't know them. It's because of confidentiality. I have no idea who gets these quilts, so I have no idea who they are. If I were with a client, like I was with the woman that cuts my hair, then we could talk about what colors do you want, what size do you want, like that. So I'm just making them up from baby size to I have not made a bed size quilt. What I've done is I've made quilts that are like throws, like you could be sitting on a chair, sitting on a couch, and it would keep you somewhat warm. So size, and then what color family do I want? And so I do that, and I usually, for me, I know there's a thing in art about less is more, but for me, more is better. So I like, one of the rules of art is unity and variety. So I take sort of a couple of dominant colors, but then I might have 7 values of this color and 6 values of this color and put them together, and I got 14 different values here. But it has a cohesive and it has a unity about it. And then there's contrast. So some of my quilts have contrast and some of them don't, because I love the arts and crafts period where there was not a lot of contrast, but a lot of rich colors together, like burgundy and emerald green and lapis blue and like that. And then and then you decide on, well, what design do I want? Do I want it to be strips? Do I want it to be blocks? And what size of the block? So the size of the block can be determined by the total size of the quilt. So if I'm doing a quilt, say a baby quilt, are usually 36 to 30 to 40 by 36 to 40, somewhere in there. And so that could be anywhere like, it could be 4 9-inch blocks across would be 36. But then you have seam allowances, and then you have borders. So, but you can still get that in. Now, if you made them smaller, like a 7-inch block, you'd get 5 across. So it'd be 5 by 5, be 25 blocks. Then within the block, what do I want to do with that? Do I want to have triangles? Do I want to have rectangles? Do I want to have all squares? So there's different patterns called 4-patch or 9-patch or fence rail or log cabin. All of these different patterns that you can look up on the internet. Just your descriptor would be like quilt patterns. You just be drowned with quilt patterns. So then choose a pattern, and then I start cutting, and then I start piecing, and then I make the individual blocks, and I trim them up, square them up, trim them so that they're square, and then piece those together, and then put the border on, and then you want a back. A backing, a lot of times, most of the time, I think, I could be mistaken, but quilters usually, I can't say this for all quilters, but quilters will just have a single piece of fabric on the back. And when I say single piece, it could be pieced, but I mean a single color. Okay. Because of Judy Harrison, again, back to the teacher who first taught me how to do the beginning quilt, she didn't do that. She had something decorative related to the front on the back. Not a lot, but just a little. And I adopted that for my quilts, and almost all, now there's a couple of that I've done single piece of fabric, but almost all my quilts have a row that relates to the front. It's the same. It could be a different size, different scale, but it relates to what's on the front. So then you put the batting, so then you iron both the top and the bottom, the top and the back, and then you have batting. So the quilt is actually a 3-layer sandwich process with the top and the batting in the middle and the backing. The batting is now, it can be all polyester if that's what you choose. It can be all cotton if that's what you choose. You can also get blends like 80% cotton, 20% polyester. Depending on what you like, you can get thick batting to thin batting, depending on what look or what. It's sort of like when you buy a down comforter. You can buy a light down comforter or one that has lots of feathers in it. So you choose the batting, and then you cut the batting, and the back actually needs to be a couple of inches larger on all sides from the top, and so does the batting, so that when you put the top on, you make sure that that by the time you trim everything, you're going to have all 3 layers evenly. All right, and then you pin it or together. Oh, I'm sorry. There's a spray adhesive to help it from sliding around. It's a temporary adhesive. And then you pin it, and then you take it to the machine and you start quilting. And you quilt it, and then what I do after quilting it is, and then the quilting you need to do pretty much every 3 to 3.5 inches in order to make sure that the quilt holds together. And then what I also do is do sort of double stitching along the edges just to make sure that they are going to remain pretty secure, because these are going to be functional pieces that are going to be loved. They're aesthetic, but they're also functional in that they're going to be used. They're going to get dirty. They're going to get thrown in the wash and the dryer. All right, so they need to hold up. So then after that, you put on the binding. Now the binding, of course, is going to relate to the color that you have in the quilt. And sometimes I do a binding that acts like a frame, so it's darker or lighter, and then sometimes I do a binding that is the same color as the border, so that anyway. So the point is, the binding finishes the quilt, and that is now everything so far has been done by machine. The binding is sewn on to the quilt top, and then it's folded over and hand sewn. Now there are people who do machine sew the binding on, and I tried that because it's faster, but I wasn't satisfied with the result. So I went back to the hand binding, which is a very nice finished look. And there you have the quilt. And then you sort of put a label on it, or you sign it and give it away, or sell it, because you can go on Etsy or any of these kind of internet sites and buy quilts. Okay.
I think we're gonna have to have you back for a quilting workshop.
Oh, uh-oh.
When things are safe, right? I think you could. That would be really fun.
Well,
so there's a lot of love that's put into each one of those.
Well, there is, because I'm loving what I'm doing,
Yeah.
and as I'm quilting, I'm thinking, I wonder who's getting this. Mm-hmm. I'm always not always, but at some point or two during the process of making a quilt, I think about, and this goes to the type of quilt in terms of a color palette. Now, pink is for girls, blue is for boys. Okay. And that's a traditional sort of gender-specific color palette. And what I attempt to do is have gender-neutral color palettes, so that a little girl, a little boy, either one might adapt to this. And every once in a while, I also make traditional sort of gender-specific. Like I'll do a very pink and soft yellow and white quilt, or I'll do a pale blue white kind of quilt. All right, occasionally, because there are not parents, but there are people that do choose that, and I don't want to censor that either, if that's their choice. Yeah, okay. I don't know.
No, that's amazing. That's good. I guess, I'm kind of going off that, that confidentiality. You don't know who these quilts are going to belong to. What is your hope for the quilts that you make in the lives of the children that they're given to? What's your hope for the quilts?
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to my very own blanket, the sort of nonprofit that was created by Jessica Rudolph in Westerville, Ohio. Her goal was, or her idea was, that foster children don't have anything of their own, pretty much. And she titled her nonprofit, or the nonprofit, My Very Own Blanket, so that there's something that the child can have and take with them as they proceed on from foster parent to foster parent. And then, of course, they can keep it as, because it's made to last, so they can keep it as an adult and pass it on, use it as a wall hanging, whatever. Would you repeat the question?
Yeah, absolutely.
I have ADD, folks. So I get.
I guess. What do you hope that quilt brings?
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I'm hoping is the quilt will give comfort. That's its purpose, is to give comfort to the user. Whether you're sitting in a chair with a quilt on your lap eating popcorn watching TV, or whatever, or you're taking a nap on your bed or on a couch, and it's going to give you comfort, but it also is going to inspire or hopefully give you some joy in that it's a piece of has an aesthetic beauty as well. And that is something that they will use and not be afraid of using and cherish and stay with and be able to keep for as long as they can.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. That's let's see. I guess I'm trying to see. I'm jumping around here a little bit. Well, kind of in that vein, I'm thinking a lot about you as a teacher in your teaching practice and how, you worked with children for a long time and you kind of switched it out. How did you balance like your art practice with your teaching practice, or were those kind of intertwined all the time?
My art practice, when I was at at the elementary level, I didn't have an art practice.
Okay, I see.
Because God bless them. Public school teacher it's a daunting position, and it takes a lot of prep, a lot of work. It's just a lot of work,
Absolutely.
And it was wonderful until it wasn't. Until it became unchallenging for me, and also I was yearning to be a maker.
Right.
That was in my 8th year of teaching. I thought, oh, okay. So when I became at the higher ed level. You do have a part of your contract at the higher ed level is teaching, service to the community, service to the school, and professional practice. Now, for me, professional practice was an academic vein. So I did lots of professional development seminars and speeches and so forth around the country and regionally and locally about art education, but also in terms of to the community, I was making these pieces to donate to charities,
right.
And so that was part of my and so that was part of my job, because as a full-time college professor, I had 3 classes during the fall semester. So I had 3 3-hour seminars, plus I had office hours, plus I had committee work. But then you have the rest of your time that you're doing professional practice, community service, and committee work to the school. So there is time in there, like Saturday and Sunday, and a couple of hours here and a couple of hours here. And when I was tile making, I would get up early, and with the tiles or with quilting, it's the kind of thing you could accomplish something in 10 minutes. You can choose fabric, you can cut some pieces, and with the tiles, I can roll out clay and let it sit. I can cut some pieces and let them sit. I can trim, I can glaze, but you can do something in a half an hour.
Yeah.
And so that's how I did it. Half hour here, 2 hours there, all day Saturday, like that.
Like that.
And that's how that's how I did it.
Yeah, to budget that time. No, absolutely. I guess, well, this is something we talked about a little bit, but there are a lot of visual similarities between your tile work and your quilt work. So I was curious, just what are the similarities to you, or how did that practice transfer?
Well, they're both about, for me, with the tile and the quilt, they're about surface design. I was always interested in tiles from a very early age. When I was 9 years old, I discovered, and I was a real nerd in school growing up, and I loved ancient civilizations and reading about that. And I discovered the Gate of Ishtar. Now, the Gate of Ishtar was a gate, a processional gate in Babylon during the time of Nebuchadnezzar. I hope that's right. If anybody, history professors, listening to this, I may be wrong there about the king. But anyway, the point is, the Germans dug it up and they took it and they reconstructed it, but they modified it, at the Pergamon in Berlin. And when I was little, I just thought, oh my gosh, here are these tiles that are like 4,000 years old, and they last forever. And I thought, wow, to make something that's going to last that long, because we're a throwaway society pretty much. And anyway, so I always loved the tiles, and I always loved the quilts, and the geometry, the symmetry, the color patterns. I think that answered. Answered
absolutely.
Your question.
Yeah, and that the way those practices really intersected. There's
Yes,
so much in common with those.
I had always, with my tile work, I'd always been influenced. I had all these quilt books, and I had 3 different quilts from grandmothers, and I would go to quilt exhibits.
Yeah.
Like, I lived in the Los Angeles area for quite a long time, and the Los Angeles County Museum of Art has an extensive quilt collection, and I always loved going to those exhibits. I don't know, there was something about it that spoke to me that because you can touch it. I mean, you can't touch it in the museum, but you can touch it, you can feel it, and you wrap yourself around it. It's a thing of beauty, but it's also functional. I just love that aspect. The same with the tile work. It's functional. If I do a fireplace around, it's part of your living space. If I did a mirror, it's part of your living space as well.
No, yeah, that's incredible. Let's see. Well, I guess we could finish out by talking about what you're working on currently, or where can viewers find your work. So we'll have John's exhibition up through February. So what else are you working on?
I do have a scheduled, although I don't know what the new schedule is, but I do have a scheduled exhibit at AS 220.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And we did that, way before the pandemic, and that was like a couple of years ahead. And now, because they had closed down quite a lot for quite a long time, so I'm not sure. I haven't heard when that's going to occur, but pretty much I don't exhibit. This is my first exhibit ever of quilts. Now, I have exhibited my work before, like in faculty shows and different shows, different exhibits in Rhode Island throughout my time here, which has been 33 years. But it's always been like one piece. Never, like, I think I have 14 pieces in this exhibit, yes. So this is a first for me at my age. And I'm thrilled about that, to be able to share, but also to be able to share the work of my very own blanket and the work of the Child Family Services in supporting foster children. So I don't have a website. I don't have an agent. You can certainly contact me. I think if you go to the newsletter page on the Greenville Public Library, of the newsletter of the library, I think my email and phone number are there, and I'd be happy to negotiate if you would like to do a commission for you, and that money will be then put back into purchasing materials for my because I support I have no other support but myself on the materials for the quilts that I'm donating to Child Family Services. So anyway, so there, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And I'm open if somebody has an opportunity for me to exhibit. I'm certainly open to doing that. This has been a pleasure. I was, as somebody who's never done an exhibit this size, and at my age, I was somewhat nervous about this. But it has been just an absolute pleasure working with Allie and Cassie Peterson here at the library. Just wonderful.
And the quilts bring us so much joy,
Thank you.
and all the patrons as well. We get so many comments on
Good.
how
Good.
bright it is in the space and everything.
Wonderful.
So we love them. Well, thank you so much for doing this with us. We're
You're
so
welcome.
excited,
You're
and
welcome.
we can put your information out there too if
Thank you.
anyone is. I hope
Thank
that AS220 show happens. That'd be
Very
really
good.
fun.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Thank
for,
you so much.
Yeah. Okay.